Hey everybody, it's AMV Reverted Studios here once again with another Maple Story video. In today's video, if you can't tell by the title, I'm going to tell a story. I mentioned this in my last video that something along the lines of being able to stay calm through the worst part of my life, and I was going to tell a story about that, but I was saving it for another time, and I guess I have time now, so here we go. The worst time of my life, it really sucked, and everything that I'm saying is all true. I am not gonna say the names of anybody involved in this story because, yeah, I guess for their own privacy, whether they were the people that hurt me or family members or whatever. So, this is not the first time I've ever lived out on my own. The first time I ever moved out, it was May 9th, 2013, I believe was the date. I was 18 years old, and I decided to move to Duluth, Minnesota for the first time. And I ended up meeting somebody, and, we fell in love. He turned out to be my first, and we dated for a while, and even lived together for quite some time. And since this was the first time that I had ever lived out on my own, I didn't really know much about how to be an adult. It was the first time I ever learned how to finance my paychecks, to pay my bills, how to keep a steady job, putting money aside for groceries and my cats and clothes and stuff like that. And so there was a lot of stress involved there, but I thought I had a pretty good grasp on it. Until I got sick of the job that I was at, which is actually the same job I'm working now. And so that started the whole job hopping. Because once I quit working where I was, I kept, the job that I had afterwards actually came to me while I was working a shift and told me that they wanted to hire me for the same amount of hours, same pay, whatever, and it was literally right next to my house. So I said, hell yeah, why not? And so I put in my 2 weeks, I started working there. I thought I was doing okay, and I was getting along with all my coworkers, and I was learning a little bit more every day that I worked there. And eventually, out of nowhere, the manager fired me. And when I asked why, he said that he did not have to discuss it with me. And yeah, so he pretty much let me go. And without any real explanation. And even my coworkers that were at that job asked me why. And when I told them that he didn't tell me, they were all really confused. And just on a side note, a couple weeks later, one of the family members of the managers got hired there, so I'm guessing I got fired and replaced by somebody's family members. So goes to show where that manager's priorities lied. Anyway, so after I lost my job, things got really hard because I had no idea how I was going to pay my half of the bills. I had no idea how I was going to feed myself or my cats or anything, which started a lot of fights between me and my boyfriend at the time. And eventually, I discovered that I had been getting cheated on throughout the entire relationship, which pretty much destroyed me because he was my first for everything, and I was really, really in love with him, and I never did anything to hurt him like that. So when I found out that pretty much our entire relationship, he was cheating on me with a girl who wasn't even in the same state, tore me to pieces. And eventually he told me that I had to leave, that I had to move out. And I was so torn up at the time, I just kind of rolled over and listened to him because I didn't have a job, and I couldn't find a job at the time, and I felt like I had no other choice but to leave because I didn't want to see his face ever again. And so I ended up having to move back to my mom's for a while, back in Jersey. And that was interesting. It was very emotionally hard because, well, I had just gotten my heart broken by the person that I thought I was going to be with for a very long time. And I was trying to get over that. And I was trying to get over the fact that I felt like a complete failure that I had to move back to my mom's with my tail between my legs. So that wasn't fun either. So I spent a long time, I think for the first couple months, just applying for jobs. It was pretty much in the dead of winter. It was um, November of 2014, I believe. November 17th, 2014 is when I moved back to my mom's house. And so it was the dead of winter, and I was just trying to keep my mind off of things. I was going outside a lot. I was going for walks whenever I could, just trying to get out and about and enjoy myself to the best of my ability, just try to keep my mind off of all the crap that I had just went through and convincing myself that I was just going to make the best of it. And my main goal at the time was just find another job, save up as much money as I can, and eventually when I find another place, move out again. And my mom knew that that was my goal, but for the meantime that I was just going to try to enjoy what I was doing. And I can't remember which came first, but I do remember finding another job. It was at the McDonald's there, and it was about 4 miles away from my house. And instead of taking the transit bus, which was like a 2-minute bus ride, and then having to walk still about 20 minutes to work, I just started walking to work. So I would walk about 3.4 miles to work, work my shift, and then walk 3.4 miles back home. You could say after the end of me living in Jersey, I had lost about 30 pounds and it was awesome. I can't say that's the case anymore because, yeah, I don't walk to work no more. Anyway, back to the story. I ended up finding a job, but I think before I found a job, I realized that not everything was as okay as my mom had let on. I ended up finding out from who now is my stepdad, that things were not as peachy as my mom made it sound over the phone before I moved back. And I think she didn't tell me what was going on because she thought maybe I wouldn't move back. But I found out that my brother was going down a very, very, very bad road. He was abusing alcohol to the point where he would often get blackout drunk, have major, I guess what I would consider temper tantrums for an adult, and break stuff. Like literally break. Apparently there had been so much property damage, and thank goodness that my stepdad is a master carpenter, because apparently he had to fix tons and tons and tons of holes in the walls and replace sheets of glass from the curio cabinets and a lot of stuff, including a lot of the stuff that I had stored there the first time that I had moved out, had either gone missing or had been broken. So, yeah. Apparently my mom couldn't tell me that, which I would have really appreciated that information before I moved back. But I had found out that my brother had been abusing alcohol. Later to find out that my brother had also been abusing other substances, probably along the lines of pot, and I do know he was abusing triple C's because I found the packaging for it in his room, which we ended up sharing a room. And that's when all the major crap started. There were so many fights, so many arguments, because talking to somebody who is abusing drugs and alcohol is not fun. Um, because you cannot talk to them, you cannot try to correct them, you cannot try to help them without them getting angry and throwing fits, and it just turning into a really, really, really aggressive, bad situation. It felt like I was I was in a war every single day that I woke up, and if I even got that luxury, because there was so many nights that he was tripping out on triple C's, and I would not be able to sleep that night because I was too afraid that while he was hallucinating, he was going to hurt me. And in the meantime, I was staying outside as much as possible. I, most of the time, even during the winter, even during rainy days, I would often stay outside. Or I, at that point, had made a few friends, so I would go over to their houses and just hang out there all day. because I did not want to be at my house. I was so done at that point with all the drama, all the bull crap. I was so done dealing with stress and being upset. And somehow it helped me learn to just stay calm at home and throughout the fights. Something inside of me just clicked and said, "You are not going to let this get to you. You are not going to let this bring you down. You are not going to let this destroy you." And I think it had a lot to do with all the hurt that I had already been going through. So I wasn't, my mind was pretty much shutting everything out. And I know I mentioned this I think I mentioned this in another video, that at one point, even though everything was crashing down, I was able to find peace. I was able to stay calm. And it took a lot to make me angry. And I think it was just because something inside of me was like, you are not going to go through this pain again. Because I had to give up everything, move back into my mom's house. You know, I was still kind of aching from the whole initial breakup thing. And all I wanted to do was focus on being happy, working my job, helping my mom with bills, paying for my own food, trying to enjoy myself and, meet new people and hang out with friends and stuff like that. And a few months went by like this, where there were still fights, there were still sleepless nights, and me staying out of the house most of the time because I just didn't want to deal with anything. And then came, I can't remember, it was towards spring, I think. Pretty sure it was towards springtime when my brother ended up going to rehab because he had tried to kill himself twice. And that was very, very scary because I remember the last conversation I had with my brother before that, I was scolding him because he was costing my mom a lot of money because he went back to stealing money from her and her not being able to afford things. And he lied about losing his job, so he pretended like he would go to work even though he would go out and get drunk with whatever little money he could. And yeah, he ended up costing my mom a lot of money, and I was scolding him about it before I went to work. And then that night, he never came home. And the next day, nobody could find him, nobody could get a hold of him until we called a certain hospital, and they said that he had been admitted. And they wouldn't tell us whether or not he was still alive. So I thought for a second, at least till on my way to the hospital, that I was going to walk into the room and there was going to be a blanket over his head and that he was going to be dead. But instead, he didn't successfully kill himself because somebody found him ODing in the back of a bar or a store. I can't remember where it was. But yeah. So my mom, because she was technically his legal guardian, even though he was well over 18, that he was going to rehab. That was it. That was the last straw. My mom was not gonna let him do his crap anymore. She couldn't handle the stress. I couldn't handle the stress. My stepdad couldn't handle the stress, that he was going to go get the help that he needed. So there were months and months and months where, probably about 3 or 4 months, where my brother was in rehab, and things started to get a lot better because I could truly find my calm at this point, because I knew my brother was getting the help that he needed, that he was going to be safe, and seeing my mom not have to be stressed out over, the crap that my brother was pulling in the arguments, and not having to worry about things getting broken, or whether or not my brother was going to be found in the hospital again or wind up dead on the streets because of his alcohol and drug abuse. So at that point, having all that off my shoulders, I was truly able to focus on myself. I wasn't exactly being the smartest at the time. I was getting into certain things I wasn't really supposed to be getting into, but I was able to stop all of that at the end I stopped doing what I was doing, and I was able to eventually save up enough money to move out. And by that time, I had truly found my peace. I was calm. I felt like a different person. I just had this overwhelming sense of peace, and like nothing could make me angry, and I was happy. And I was able eventually. Oh, I'm sorry. My English sucks right now. I was eventually able to save up enough money to move back to Minnesota. And when I did, I was dumb and decided to give my ex a chance again, and things didn't work out as usual because you should never give your ex another chance. They're an ex for a reason, especially one that had cheated on you. I ended up getting replaced within a couple weeks by another girl, and at that point I said, excuse my language, fuck this. I'm not dealing with this anymore, and I ended up taking a very long time being single to find myself and to just focus on myself because I wasn't going to go through that pain and suffering again. I did spend about a month where I was pretty damn upset because I felt really dumb that I had given a guy who had previously broken my heart another chance. And so after that, I decided enough was enough, and I stayed single for months. I just went to work. I made friends that were coworkers, and one of them was his name was Peter, and he was definitely my closest friend for several months. I could always go over to his house. I could always rely on him to be there for me, and he helped me out a lot. I came I was able to reconnect with one of my friends, Jojo, from when I was previously in Minnesota. And so that was fun. And I was just able to kind of find my peace. I went to the gym a lot. I hung out with my coworkers a lot. I just kind of focused on being at work and paying my bills and doing what I had to do. And eventually, around April, when my current roommate went to basic training, I met Nick. And it sounds kind of silly, but we did end up meeting on a dating website. Because at that point, I just threw up a profile on a dating website because I was like, you know what? I'm not in a rush to find somebody, so I'm just gonna do this and focus on my life. And if I meet somebody, I meet somebody. And I had a few dates, like a few first dates here and there with different other guys who just weren't my type, or they wanted the wrong kind of thing, or they wanted to jump into a super fast intimate relationship, or they wanted me to be somebody I couldn't be. And so once I gave up on that site, I ended up getting messaged by this guy named Nick, and I thought he was super cute, and we eventually exchanged phone numbers, and we met up on our first date, and it's been cake ever since. 5 months down the road, I couldn't be more in love with this guy, and he's always there for me, and he's just probably the best man I've ever met in my life, to be completely honest. And pretty much the sum of this story is, things do pass. Everything eventually will get better. Because this story, I just briefly explained, that was probably a good year of my life. Between the breakup, losing my job, my brother's issues, the family fights, and trying to find myself again. There was so much stuff I didn't mention because it would take too long, plus it would make for a better video later. This video has already gone on long enough, but pretty much the sum of this story is no matter what happens, what kind of pain you're going through, what kind of bullshit enters your life, that it does eventually get better. And the best thing you can do is take time for yourself, relearn yourself, try to stay as calm and positive as possible, and eventually things will work out. Anyway, this is AMV Reverted Studios, and I will see you next time for another story.